guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. We're going to talk about Star Wars, the rise of Skywalker. Skywalker Rising, the Risening, the Quickening, the whatever the hell they're calling this. The last Star Wars movie of the Skywalker saga again. This one's going to be the last Star Wars movie. This is episode 9. Episode 9. So we're going to talk about how Palpatine is supposedly coming back and just the ridiculousness of this movie. I did a video a couple days ago talking about how the movie is apparently in shambles. It's in shambles right now, that there are 2 or 3 different cuts floating around. One of them includes a magical new Skywalker that was never referred to or mentioned before. They're going to bring in, per George Lucas. Again, that's just a rumor coming from, I think, Doomcock. Coming to him via alleged insiders. Can't prove any of it, but it would make sense given that we're not seeing a whole lot about this movie. They're still doing reshoots, and Bob Iger seems like he's really flipping out anytime anybody asks him about Star Wars, at least in that Q4 earnings call. He seemed like he wasn't very happy to talk about Star Wars. Very defensive. He was very defensive despite them having a good quarter. I think Star Wars is a sore subject for them right now, with Galaxy's Edge massively underperforming, with Solo bombing, with merchandise sales stagnating, and with these reshoots for the Rise of Skywalker reportedly costing upwards of $300 million. It's like a whole nother movie. Like, if it is true that they had to reshoot that much of the Rise of Skywalker, we're talking twice the price for this movie compared to other Star Wars movies. Anyway, we're going to get into that. Before we get into it, I wanted to show you this, though. This is actually sent to me via the Chad. Maybe Mark Hamill is trying to give us a warning. Brent Ashcroft says, bought 32 tickets. Better be good. This movie better be good. 32 tickets to the Rise of Skywalker. Maybe he's the one that's buying all the tickets that are mysteriously being bought. To which Mark Hamill says, or you could just wait until it comes to cable. Oh, Mark Hamill's been throwing some shade at Star Wars, but he does it in such a way that you kind of have to wonder what he really thinks. There's plausible deniability. He makes these little jabs, and I don't think he's going to be in the movie very much. I think it's going to be the Rise of Skywalker, and I think we're going to see very few actual Skywalkers in this movie. That is a hunch I have. So before we get into the video, please give us a sub if you haven't done so already. I think we're at about 72,000 subs. Hoping for 100 pretty soon. If you guys weren't aware, we actually have 2 other channels that we're trying to get started. We're splitting our content up. This is going to be primarily for pop culture news, views, and rants, which has sort of overtaken the channel. We also have a channel out there called Clownfish Animation, where we're going to be doing more art videos, and a gaming channel, Clownfish TV Gaming. If you haven't checked those channels out, please do that right now. SquidKing and I are playing through Ghostbusters, the video game remastered. It's a lot of fun. We don't complain about much, just when the game gets frustrating. That's what we complain about over there. So all the gaming content and the animation content, art content have been moved to other channels, so we can just piss and moan over here, I guess, all day and all night. Star Wars 9 theory: Palpatine survived by turning himself into Force energy. Yeah, okay, so God, there are multiple versions of this. I actually was tipped off to this via Mike Zero. He did a video yesterday where they talk about how Palpatine's supposed to come back. And, they really have to reach, because everybody thought when Vader threw Palpatine down the bottomless pit and he exploded into blue energy, that was like the dark force powers being released, and it was like a woo, and it was, he was done. He was done. They blew him up, and that was his evil essence just dispersing out into the galaxy. Well, apparently, there are some rumors that blue energy was actually him teleporting himself to this giant iceberg planet, where he's going to be hiding out in a robot chair. Like in the trailer, he's going to be strapped to a robot chair that comes down from the ceiling, and somehow he magically transported himself after he had been thrown down the bottomless pit to this ice planet. That is the theory. I don't know how else they're going to bring him back. I actually like the clone idea better. That made a hell of a lot more sense in Dark Empire. But of course, we couldn't use the expanded universe. But the clone theory made a hell of a lot of sense, especially since Palpatine engineered the clone army. Since he was the guy behind the clone army, would make total sense that he would call in a few favors, maybe at Kamino, and be like, hey guys, could you give me an endless supply of bodies that I could inhabit? That would make more sense than teleporting himself to a giant iceberg out in the middle of nowhere, reportedly next to a black hole. I don't know. This all sounds very confusing and very J.J. Abrams. And if this is the case, then I can see why Bob Iger, allegedly took a look at this movie and was like, yeah, this is a shit show. We're going to refilm this. So Star Wars 9 theory, Palpatine survived by turning himself into Force energy. Since then, it's become clear that Darth Sidious will be returning with a vast armada behind him. Yeah, where do you get all the ships? A secret fleet of Imperial Star Destroyers armed with Death Star technology. So this is kind of like sharks with lasers on their heads, isn't it? Like, we don't just have another Death Star. We've got a bunch of Star Destroyers with lasers, Death Star lasers on their heads now. So it's not just one Star Destroyer you have to worry about, or one Death Star you have to worry about, rather. It's a whole bunch of Death Stars. And they did that in the expanded universe too, if I remember. They had a place where they had a whole bunch of spare, I'm trying to remember, it was one of the comics. Maybe it was Dark Empire, where they had a whole bunch of spare Death Stars. So this has all been done before. Star Wars canon has long confirmed that Palpatine has been obsessed with eternal life. That is true. That is true. The first clue was offered in Revenge of the Sith, when he told Anakin Skywalker the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise. A lot of people thought Snoke would turn out to be Darth Plagueis. And we know the deal at the opera. Since then, he's been shown collecting relics connected to Sith who had attempted to find a way to live forever. Star Wars 9 writer-director J.J. Abrams is well known for his mystery box marketing approach. This time around, the greatest mystery is, of course, just how Palpatine has returned from the dead. Naturally, attentive viewers are pouring through the various tie-ins in search of clues. You shouldn't have to. This is what aggravates me so much about Disney Star Wars, is that, so much of what should be shown on screen to casual viewers is relegated to books and games and tie-in media that 99% of people are not even gonna look at. You shouldn't have to create an entire comic book series or novel series to explain something that you should have just explained on screen. Now, to a certain extent, George Lucas was guilty of that too with the prequels, but I never felt during the prequels that if I missed Clone Wars or I missed some of the novels that I didn't know what was going on. With the sequel trilogy, I have no effing idea what's going on. We don't even know what the First Order is. We don't know what the Resistance is. We don't know why they're still having X-Wings and TIE Fighters and Stormtroopers 30 years later, and virtually, time has not moved forward at all. Like, you see the progression from the prequel era to the original trilogy, but now here we are in the sequel era, and everything's still the freaking same way it was 30 years ago, probably so Disney could sell Stormtrooper toys and X-Wing toys and TIE Fighters. That's my guess, So, attentive viewers are pouring through the various tie-ins. One recent novel, George Mann's Myths and Fables, may have dropped a hint. Star Wars Myths and Fables is a collection of in-universe legends, and one of the most interesting is a story called Gaze of Stone. This is set in the Sith homeworld of Moraban, and it reveals the secret of a mysterious stone statue that's situated on a cliff top. According to Star Wars Myths and Fables, it's tied to a Force user named Rye Nimbus. Yada yada. So, Rye Nimbus began to pore over ancient secrets, learning forgotten Sith magics that he hoped would help him achieve his goal. One of these was a ritual that allowed him to transform flesh into matter, and he attempted to perform it upon his master. Ironically, Darth Caldoth, Calgon, take me away, Darth Caldoth, had known better than to trust his apprentice, and he had sabotaged the ritual, so it backfired upon Rye Nimbus. He was transformed into a rock, fully conscious but forever imprisoned. He got turned into a rock. This raises the distinct possibility that Darth Sidious survived death by using a similar Sith enchantment. The Emperor's death in Return of the Jedi was accompanied by a massive burst of energy. Viewers have traditionally assumed that this was simply a release of the dark side, but it could have actually been Palpatine himself. Well, that was actually, if I remember correctly, it's been many years since I read it, but Dark Empire, I believe it was explained that the big blue explosion was his life essence, and then it was transferred into a clone body. That is more plausible than what they're saying is going to probably happen. But now they're saying that his throne room is constructed in such a way as to amplify his power and allow him to transform into an energy state rather than die. Note that Star Wars tie-ins have confirmed the Emperor built all his throne rooms to exactly the same specs, perhaps just for this purpose. The one problem with this strategy, though, is we have to explain this to the audience that doesn't read the tie-in books and make it make sense and not have people be like, what the hell is actually going on in this movie? No, the problem is that Palpatine would be unable to turn himself back. He'd be trapped in energy form. So now they're talking about all these Emperor throne rooms all over the place and yada, 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 yada. He's coming back physically, and they're supposedly going to pull in, all of this stuff, again, from the tie-ins, from Rebels, all of this to explain how Palpatine magically came back from the dead. And I don't think any of the explanations are going to be sufficient. I think the audience is going to have a hell of a lot of questions. I mean, the audience that we watched Solo with, you could tell they were all casual Star Wars fans because there were people mumbling about Darth Maul coming back at the end of Solo. They're like, what the hell? You know, kind of like, what the hell? It's like, yeah, you had to go watch the tie-in cartoon, then you realize he got robo legs, even though that doesn't even make a lot of sense because they literally cut him in half so he would never come back again. I mean, this is just desperation. You know, bringing Palpatine back at this point is desperation. I mean, I think everybody would have been completely okay with Vader throwing him down a shaft and he's done and crisis averted. Now, they did talk about how he was looking for, you know, eternal life, and I always took it to mean that the irony in all of this was that Palpatine looked for eternal life and he couldn't find it. He couldn't find a way to live on, but Yoda and Obi-Wan and Anakin did through the light side of the Force. Palpatine was looking to the dark side to survive, and the answer was actually on the light side, that you know, they had lived on as spirits. And that was always my takeaway from it. And I thought it was like, well, he was in this vain quest for eternal life and he could never find it through the dark side. Haha, now he's dead. You know? But no, we're going to have to make it more complicated than that. And I think J.J. Abrams is going to really complicate things. I mean, I just don't have a lot of hope for this movie. A lot of people don't have a lot of hope for it. It could be okay. But there are supposedly test screenings. We've had some people pop up in comments say that they've claimed that they've seen the test screening of it, and the movie's actually not bad, but it does seem like Disney is scrambling. I think explaining how Palpatine came back is going to be one of the biggest, you know, WTF moments in Star Wars. And, you know, I don't know how general audiences are going to take to it. I really don't. I think people would have had an easier time believing that Snoke was Plagueis, you know, that he was, you know, because he was badly damaged, that Snoke was Plagueis. But apparently Palpatine, you know, from the rumors, is going to have this big epic monologue where he explains everything and how he came back in this big convoluted way. And yeah, I wonder if that's why the third act, a lot of people reportedly during the test screening were like, the third act is complete dog shit. And, you know, did not get a good rating at all. Because, surprise, here's Palpatine, and here's a long, convoluted, James Bond-esque, Blofeld-esque speech as to how he survived his fall to the bottom of the bottomless pit and the explosion. But, yeah, the rumor seems to be that this explosion is him teleporting himself. I can't even. But we'll see. 6 more weeks, I think, until we get this film in all its glory, whichever version of it they finally decide to release. Hey guys, thanks for watching Clownfish TV. Please consider supporting the channel. Go to clownfishsupport.com. That's clownfishsupport.com. And if you want to join our community, go to clownfishtalk.com. That's clownfishtalk.com. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We will talk to you next time.